we are joined by a great friend of the American Center for Law and Justice and the broadcast, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney of New York, who was first elected to serve to the United States House of Representatives in 2016. And she's been a lead on taking that money that was, again, put in that Inflation Reduction Act to build up the IRS with 87,000 new agents at $80 billion and using it for something good, like Border Patrol agents and ICE, and making sure they have the resources they need. So we're talking about that because she's got new legislation on that now that the Republicans are in charge of the House of Representatives. But I think we want to go to topic one right away.
Congressman, thanks for being with us. I wanted to ask you before we get into the particulars on defunding these IRS agents, which our entire audience is with you 100% on, your reaction to now the Department of Justice and now these leaks that are coming out that President Biden, when he was a former vice president, did not have clearance to waive security clearances, had on his purse or in his foundation's offices SCI material, including SCI material, which is sensitive, compartmented information, high level of classification, on Iran, Ukraine, of all places, and the United Kingdom. Your reaction to this information?
Well, obviously, this is outrageous. And what's really the worst of this is that it was known before the midterm elections. The Justice Department knew, and they didn't do anything to get this out. This is purely political, and it's something that needs to be investigated. It's why I support the Republicans creating a new church-style type of committee, the church committee formed after Watergate, to go in and investigate what's going on with the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, our own powerful arms of government that are spying on our own citizens, going after our own citizens in a political way, not based on equality. And this is what's incredible, is that these are politicized arms, attacking President Trump. Why haven't we attacked Joe Biden's home? What about the documents that Joe Biden has when he was vice president that are under seal at the University of Delaware? Why aren't we going through those documents? Oh, why? Because he's a Democrat, and we have Democrats in charge of the Justice Department, in charge of the FBI, and they're highly partisan, and they're basically, not only did they collude with Twitter, we know they got together with Twitter to either censor thought, censor Twitter feed. They also with Meta, Facebook. I mean, this is really problematic, and the American people should be completely outraged at what's happening right now and what's being exposed by this good reporting, actually.
I agree with you, Congresswoman Tenney. It's time to investigate the investigators. And, we know that they get freaked out when that happens, when you start looking into...
Oh, and then they start.
Yeah, you start looking at what the McCabe's, the Strocks, and what they were doing. And, of course, they're just replaced by very similar people. We know that. The bureaucracy, almost just as bad as the political appointees.
Sometimes worse.
It's sometimes worse. Let's get to your legislation as well, because this is very important to our audience. They were outraged when this $80 billion was passed by Congress to empower 87,000 new IRS agents to come after, as was reported, mostly middle-class Americans, people who can't afford tax attorneys and accountants, and so people that would be easy pickings for the IRS, if you will. We remember on their website they had to take down that they wanted these people to be armed and ready to use deadly force when they were doing recruiting for that. And you've got legislation you're going to reintroduce, the Redirect Act. Tell people about that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And yes, these people who are against the Second Amendment are all for arming the bureaucrats in Washington, particularly the IRS agents. And I've said this, many times. Our system of justice. And you two are lawyers. I'm also a lawyer. Our system is founded on the very principle that you are innocent until proven guilty. That is but the IRS always operates as if you are guilty until proven innocent. We're finding out the FBI works much that way as well as the Department of Justice. But what we had, all of a sudden, I was like, oh, wait, we're going to put 87,000 new IRS agents. And there's like, well, we haven't had an increase, the Democrats claim. Well, guess what? We have modern technology. We have the internet. We don't need all these IRS agents. So much of this has been digitized. And secondly, they're saying, well, we needed to upgrade and start going after these millionaires and billionaires who aren't paying for their, paying their taxes. And we found out that they're like, oh, and this didn't all go to that. Well, let's tell you, the IRS would have about 165,000 new people altogether, which is nearly the size of the U.S. Marine Corps. That's what they're going to do with a federal bureaucracy And let me lay this out. Every one of those people is going to be potentially armed, maybe because they need to go do audits. But every one of those people is going to get a very high salary plus pension plus health care, all at the cost of the taxpayers. And the truth is that the people who end up getting audited tend to be people who make $75,000 or less. And they're claiming, only 45 million of that was going to be for enforcement. But why are we spending $80 billion to collect a modest share? It's because they want to grow the bureaucracy. That's how Democrats gain power. They have grown the federal bureaucracy. You come to beautiful Washington and see these wonderful historic buildings. You know what's surrounding us? These massive brutalist-style buildings that sort of cloud out the beauty of our original conception, and they're filled with bureaucrats who have more power in many cases than the own American people. That is the big problem with government right now.
I wrote a book, Congressman, a number of years ago called Undemocratic, and how unelected bureaucrats are running our government. And it's true. And listen, I worked for Treasury at the IRS, Chief Counsel's Office of the IRS. It was 40-something years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago. But what's the irony of all this to me is when you look at this, I've said the IRS is an institution incapable of self-correcting. We did those cases when they were targeting the Tea Parties. As soon as Biden came back and we got an injunction and we got monetary damages and everything was fine for about 4 years. And then the moment President Biden is sworn into office, Christians Engaged was the group that got it. A friend of ours, Kelly Shackelford's organization, handled the audit request. It was outrageous. They said they came up with a lexicon of initials. D equals Republican. W was the word of God. I mean, that an agent is even thinking about this was outrageous. We filed a FOIA request. We're in federal court right now, and now the IRS is finally having to hand over documents. But you're absolutely right. The bureaucracy's totally out of control. Throwing more money at it doesn't solve the problem.
No, I agree. And also the IRS, I'm also a bank attorney and a tax attorney. So I represented a lot of small businesses. I represented various banks in many years ago when I first started my practice. And I represented a lot of people who were small business owners, but people that had a couple million in sales to companies having 200 or 300 million in sales. Those people typically didn't have to worry about audits because they could afford to hire us to go in and make sure that we got things cleared up. But the IRS selectively goes after people, just as you identified. It's much like the whole situation where they went after President Trump's lawyer and claimed that he violated the safe harbor rules. They actually prosecuted him criminally, and this was he actually got a benefit through working in the Trump organization, where he should have paid the taxes. But in most cases, if I were dealing with the IRS in a case like that, they probably would have called me and said, first of all, this was a mistake. I'm assuming I didn't get into the heart of the case. He was prosecuted by the very politically charged Letitia James from New York, the Attorney General, who turned civil actions into criminal actions, which is what she was trying to do to the Trump organization, every member of the Trump family, and anyone associated with President Trump. But this is where it's dangerous. If you can turn civil actions into criminal actions, I'm just saying, my experience with the IRS, that would have likely been a phone call to say, hey, you owe this is what you owe, correct your return, pay the money, maybe even pay a penalty, pay interest on it, and we move on. You
said a key thing there, and that is phone call. Let me tell you what they don't do. Return phone calls. I mean, I can't tell you how many IRS tax preparers and auditors and CPAs and tax lawyers have called and said, we can't even get them to respond.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge issue with the American people, and yet the smallest amount of funds that was in this legislation of the $80 billion was to modernize the IRS. I think that most of the Republican legislation wants to keep it. Says if you can actually do that, fine, do that. But again, for the Democrat purposes, that was not the goal here. I want to ask you another question. That was about the rules package that got passed. So there was a lot of talk about this as well. Do you think this is it was good that these rules, because you get both sides of the media, that it kind of re-empowers members of Congress?
Look, this rules package was presented we've been debating each one of these different rules that were ultimately in the rules package since Election Day. So members-elect have been going through this, the new members of Congress that were coming in for their freshman term. We debated these. We voted on these in conference. There was a very minimal change when we actually got to the floor last week when you saw the excitement with these rules. And the major substantive change was this thing called the motion to vacate the chair. That means that a member can go to the floor, make a motion to vacate the chair, and cause a vote on the speaker. So that instead of 5 members, we brought it back to 1, which, by the way, it had been historically. The question is, people said, oh, we're going to go down every day and you're going to have someone make a motion to vacate the chair. But remember, you still have to get members to come back and vote on that. And it's going to be interesting because I just don't think, it could potentially be abused, but I just think any member that's going to go down and when they don't get everything they want, they're going to, do this motion. I think that it's going to lose its luster, and I think it's going to help us actually stick together.
We appreciate that, Congresswoman. Thanks for your hard work on behalf of all of us. We look forward to your legislation moving forward, and we appreciate your comments today.